Okay, so I need to explain what's happened here. Basically, this video is about Juf, the highest permanently inhabited village in all of Europe, in the very far southeast of Switzerland. However, I had a very long filming day before this with the Tim Traveller, and I couldn't get to Milan Linate from Belgium, where we were filming, until 11 p.m. And there aren't any airports closer to Juf than this one, so I had to arrive, immediately rush to the car, and then drive up to Juf, which would take about 3 or 4 hours. Unfortunately, the intro that I recorded while finding the car, the audio didn't record. So yeah, here's me finding the car, and here's me getting in, and here's me starting the drive. Okay, let's drive. So now we're on the motorway. I can give you a list of the reasons why I was a little bit unsure about making this video. Basically, it was because I thought there might not be that much to say about it. But it turns out that once I started writing a script, it actually was pretty interesting. And the other reason is that I was a bit unsure about making it is that the whole idea of a highest permanently inhabited village in Europe is kind of a bit shaky. It's a bit hard to define. So Juf is just over 2,100 meters above sea level. So it's high, but it's not, altitude sickness level. But then there is there's a village in Dagestan in Russia, the name of which will appear here, and that is just over 2,500 meters above sea level. So that's quite a bit higher. But personally, I don't really think the Southern Caucasus region is Europe. It's a sort of bridge between Europe and Asia. I know UEFA considers it Europe, but it just really doesn't feel like Europe. And so I'm not including it. And that also means I'm not including the other town that lays claim to being the highest village in Europe, which is this in Georgia, which is also higher than Juf. But we're discounting both of them. Juf takes the crown. Is this the border? Yeah, Swiss flag. Huh, that was faster than I expected. They were really not happy with my GoPro. All right, hello Switzerland. Oh, it's darker here. I don't know, we're more than, no, it's 2.5, no, we're less than halfway through this journey. Ugh, about 109 kilometers until my destination. Well, this looks like it would be very pretty in the daytime. I have to say, I know it's such a boring thing to say, but the roads are immaculate in Switzerland. They're in such good shape. Right, apologies for the break in footage. My GoPro ran out of battery. But yes, now we're back. We've got it running. We're 20 minutes from Cresta, which is where I'm staying tonight. Right, lights off. Let's go. I'm so tired, I can't even be bothered to put music on. We are really out there now. These tunnels are a bit creepy. Whoa, hello. We're so close. Okay, there you go, Cresta. This looks quite hotelish. Capetta, that's it. Okay, I will see you back here in 5 hours, I think, something like that. Right, well, that was quite a pleasant night, actually. This is Cresta, and it is time to make my way to Juf. So let's get in the car, back in the bloody car. These are some views. It cannot be said that these are not views. Blimey. This looks like Juf, I'm not gonna lie, from what I've seen on Google Images. Yeah, this is it. This is Juf. Welcome to the highest altitude, permanently inhabited village in Europe. I have not seen many landscapes like this in my life. It's like sort of Scotland on steroids. The drive is over. It was 25 degrees in Milan yesterday at 11 p.m. It's maybe 2 degrees up here. Right, well, while I'm stopped on the edge of this megalopolis of Juf, I should actually mention that earlier when I stopped because the GoPro ran out of battery, the other reason I stopped is because my phone stopped working because I'd crossed over into Switzerland and I just ran out of data as a result. And that's actually why Olafly are sponsoring this video. Their eSIMs work in over 200 destinations with unlimited data, so you don't end up in situations like mine where you're suddenly offline in the middle of the Alps. You can get their eSIM and install it ahead of time and just stay online when you cross a border or when you land. They've also just introduced a benefit called Always On, where basically once you've installed any Olafly eSIM, you automatically get a gigabyte of global data backup every month. So if your plans change, your trip gets extended, or you just unexpectedly need data somewhere, you've still got that backup there. It's just one of those things that gives you a little peace of mind. So when you're next traveling, Olafly also have monthly subscription plans covering more than 160 destinations, as well as regional and global eSIMs. It's perfect for any type of travel. You can get 5% off their eSIMs and 10% off Olafly plans for the first 12 months using my code WHATONEARTH and following the link in the description.
Right, now let's go back to Youth. I suppose now I have to explain how this town got here and what it's like. So this is Switzerland. As you might be aware, it's a country smack dab in the centre of Western Europe. Nowadays, it's the home of 4 official languages: Romansh, Italian, French, and most dominantly, German. Now, each of these linguistic regions has their own cultural norms and exports, but in reality, dividing the country into 4 is a pretty reductive way of looking at Switzerland. Within each of these 4 main cultural categories are hundreds upon hundreds of subcultures with their own languages and everything. To use a LinkedIn-ism, Switzerland is an extremely granular country, where cultural homogeneity has always been resisted by the tiny villages stuck deep within valleys, where regular contact with the outside world is, relatively speaking, a pretty recent thing. One of these cultures that has managed to remain distinct from its fellow Germanic cousins are the Walser Germans. Now, who are the Walser Germans? Basically, back in the 5th century, this area of what is now southern Switzerland and known as Valais was full of Romans who came and got settled after subjugating and basically absorbing everyone else who already lived here. But the Western Roman Empire was a bit crumbly by this point, and they crumbled their way out of the Alps and back down into the Italian peninsula, allowing a bunch of Germanic tribes, collectively known as the Alemanni, to come down and settle in Valais, where they chilled for a few hundred years. But in the 12th century, something quite weird happened. One of the random chunks of German speakers decided that their homeland is for chumps and opted to start migrating all over the place. Historians and anthropologists aren't 100% sure what prompted this, but there are quite a few theories. The most common theory states that the Rhone Valley down here was becoming overcrowded as more Germanic peoples kept moving in. Furthermore, these Germanic peoples moving into the region were originally subsistence farmers. They farmed to keep themselves and their communities alive. But as they got settled and started to form cities, the concept of commercial farming was born, where extra meat and cheese was created to be sold to other communities. And this required tons of extra farming space. And this one group that left clearly didn't want anything to do with that. They wanted to stay insular and subsist on their own terms. And tied into this theory is that of something called the medieval warm period, which was between about 950 AD and 1250 AD. So this 300-year period was where summers were slightly above the norms of the previous millennia, and thus saw the gradual destruction of lots of glaciers and icy snowy regions at high altitude, leaving big untouched open plains with lovely new grass for cows to eat. And so this mysterious group said bye to the metropolitan elites of the Rhone Valley and headed up to the heavens. Though many eventually migrated simply to higher altitude parts of Valais, thousands of others spread across the Alps, and by leaving behind the main cohort of German speakers, their language essentially froze in time and branched off into its own thing, which became known as Walser German. And that name ended up being applied to all these guys who migrated into the mountains, the Walser Germans. Once the medieval warming period ended in the 13th century, winters started getting brutally cold again, and the Walsers, who were now up in the colder parts of Switzerland, decided that they were too proud to admit that they'd made a dreadful mistake and just styled it out, forming permanent settlements and going, "What are you guys talking about? This isn't cold at all." They created some quite famous towns. For example, Simplon, Klosters, and Davos were all originally Walser settlements. I bet they didn't realize that they would pave the way for godless global elites to convene via helicopter 1,000 years later. They were actually seen by feudal lords in the region as a handy addition to the area, as they were very hardy and resilient subsistence farmers who offered significant stability among the population. In fact, they were so useful that local lords allowed them to have lots and lots of land and even their own justice system, the Walserrecht, in exchange for paying a bit of money and pledging allegiance to the regional military. One of the regions that had only recently become at least mildly livable post-warm period was the Avers Valley, up here in what is now the canton of Graubünden, near the Italian border. There's evidence of human activity here dating back to around the 3rd century AD, but there's no evidence that people actually lived here permanently at that time.
And at the deepest, darkest, furthest ends of the valley, the Walser people created the village of Youth.
And here it is. It has a population of about 30 people, almost all of whom are still descendants of the Walser Germans, and pretty much all of whom speak Walser German still.
And by settling here, the Walser people happened to create the highest altitude permanently inhabited village in Europe. Isn't that fun? Again, I'm excluding Russia and the other Caucasus nations with that. If you have a problem with that, you can go make your own video about it.
At 2,126 meters above sea level, Juf is well above the tree line, the altitude at which trees can no longer easily grow due to a mixture of extreme cold and a lack of adequate moisture, and thus the Avers Valley is remarkably barren.
At this altitude, the oxygen is certainly measurably lower. It's about 20% lower up here than it is at sea level, but it's nothing extreme. It's not like people are, passing out and needing supplemental oxygen tanks when they come here. Yeah, it's perfectly livable. And obviously there are places in Switzerland where you can go way, way higher than this. Like as Tim showed in his video, you can get a train up to the top of Jungfraujoch, which is like 3,500 meters above sea level. But obviously living up there might be a bit of a challenge.
Either way, the village itself is a rather pretty little place consisting of only a handful of buildings, many of which are built in the distinct Walser style that hasn't changed much since the 13th century.
Now I'm hoping that because this hotel, which is Edelweiss, doesn't open until June, that I'm not disturbing anybody by filming here. But yes, this is an example of how almost all of the houses are built in the traditional Walser style, which is very distinct and has also been picked up by other communities across Switzerland and also the rest of the Alps. And it is defined by larch wood, which is a very, very hardy wood that is quite watertight and waterproof. So it's very good for withstanding weather. It's also very heavy and dense. And the closest forests to here at the bottom of the valley, I believe, are larch forests. So that's why it was the easiest one to import up to Juf. And it is defined also by crisscrossed. They're built in very tightly packed stacks like this up one way, and then they are interlocked at the corners, so they sort of crisscross each other. So this wall comes out to here and that one comes out to here, and it just adds a bit more stability to the frame and makes it really good for withstanding weather. So yes, obviously the interlocking corners are one key trademark of Walser architecture, but another one is that the roofs of these houses are often weighed down with a metamorphic stone that comes from the area called gneiss, and it's so heavy that they literally they just cover the roof with it, partially for protection from the elements, but also partially just to weigh the building down, because in a treeless valley this high up, winds can get very, very, very strong, and so they genuinely wanted to stop parts of their houses from blowing away. So yeah, they're very, very sturdy, these houses. Clearly they've withstood a millennium up on this hill. Not this one, this is clearly not 1,000 years old, but you know what I mean.
Another thing they have are little tiny windows to minimize their exposure to the outdoors.
So this is a better example of some much more old school, really sturdy larch interlocking. That is like a brick, that is so dense. So it's another thing that is really stupid. It sounds really silly, but like it does make a difference having 20% less oxygen. It's not like mind-blowing, but I walked up that hill and now I feel like I'm incredibly out of shape.
And another key feature of Walser architecture, which I actually didn't see, were Mausplatte, which are little stilts that barns and grain stores stand on to avoid the extreme moisture on the ground in these very snowy regions.
And up this high, it gets very snowy and very cold indeed. In winter, an average day, the high temperature in the middle of the day will be about -5 degrees Celsius, with nighttime temperatures averaging around -12 degrees Celsius. And it can occasionally drop down to like -22-ish, I think. It's done that a few times up here. So yeah, pretty cold. From like November to about April, this place is just blanketed in snow. It must be like that opening chapter in Red Dead 2. Obviously, I think that's the greatest game of all time, but there's no getting around the fact that that opening chapter is extremely dull. Fun fact, obviously, as many people will know, Switzerland has one of the most extensive public transport networks anywhere in the world. Any village with a pulse has a bus network, and Juf is one of them, all the way up here in the clouds. So yeah, obviously the company that runs these buses is called Postbus or PostAuto. And so they cover like pretty much every square inch of Switzerland. Why are these cows suddenly so mooey? Hey, what are you saying? They were founded in the mid-1800s and they couldn't actually serve Juf until at least 1895, because that's when the first proper road was built into the town. And even then it was only accessible in summer. However, an even more fun fact is that because PostAuto or Postbus was originally founded in the mid-1800s, that means that for the first few decades of its existence, it used horse and carriage in place of, motorized buses. Obviously, they switched over at the turn of the century when the motor car became more mainstream. Almost every proper line in Switzerland switched, except the one up here in the Avers Valley up to Juf. So from Cresta up to here, that remained a horse-pulled carriage instead of a bus until 1961. How about that then? There's a cat on that windowsill. You see, I wasn't lying.
And the following year, in 1962, a fully winterproof year-round road was built into the village. But did the people use this as an excuse to leave this place? No, they didn't. Why would they? As far as I can tell, being a Walser German is quite an exclusive little club. They're extremely proud of their heritage and their history as incredibly hardy, weather-worn people, able to withstand the roughest climates on the continent and come out the other side with a plate of their iconic Ziege cheese, which I tried and I was not a fan of. As much as I love cheese, I don't know what you lads are doing up there. Let's knock it on the head.
And the way that the Walser have isolated themselves in these tiny little random pockets of Switzerland means that a lot of the time their culture and their ethnic identity has barely been diluted at all. If you look at Davos, like that was obviously originally a Walser town and now it's only about 2% Walser because obviously other people moved in as it became a fancy tourist town, ski town in particular. But in Juf, I mean, who else would want to live up here? This place is remote as hell. It's extremely isolated. It's very cold. It's not even that warm in summer. There are very few people who could make this their home. And yet obviously the Walser have done so in a way that seems to bring them great joy. Oh, there are nice white flowers blossoming here. One thing that is kind of funny is that it is obviously very peaceful because it's incredibly tiny, but there's actually enough cows mooing and running water in the village that it's actually kind of noisy. There you go, 2,126 meters above sea level. Can you hear that? And it's not until now that I've left the village again that it's suddenly very quiet. I think what I would say is the strangest thing about this place is the fact that obviously it's inhabited year round. I have not seen a single person. I know it's a Sunday morning, but it's 10:15 now. I feel like I would see one person somewhere, maybe, I don't know. And so now, apparently I read online that Juf is obviously the highest village, but then beyond Juf, there is one farmhouse that sits at a slightly higher level and is thus the highest altitude farmhouse in Europe. And I think maybe we should go and see that while we're here. Right, let's go. Right, well that was entering Juf. And that's exiting Juf. I don't actually know if I'm allowed up here. I would quite like it if there were a place where I could turn round, but this is just a single track road. I am not driving over that bridge. I'm not driving over a handmade wooden bridge in a brand new rental car. So we're gonna stop here. The house is just there. I'll film it quickly.
I actually spoke to the mayor of Juf for this video, a Miss Dorley Men, over email, and she was very kind and told me some of the things about the place and when I should come. And obviously I didn't heed her advice because I'm here at 7 AM on a Sunday and so it's a little quiet. But either way, after a short back and forth, I asked if she'd be interested in a Zoom interview. She politely but firmly responded simply, "Oh no thanks, that's not really my thing." A quick bunch of emails to other hoteliers and bar owners in the town, and I discovered that nobody really wanted to speak to me.
And hey, maybe that says something about me. Maybe I'm an insufferable bellend on email or on camera. But it also says something about the Walser people, I feel. They're like fiercely isolationist, but very humble and down-to-earth people who just kind of want to be left alone in their little corner of Europe. And yeah, that's kind of admirable. I quite like it. I realize I'm going to talk about them a bit like they're zoo animals, but they're happy up here. You know, it's a situation that maybe outsiders might find peculiar living somewhere like this, but they've fully embraced it. They've made it part of their entire sort of ethnic identity of, you know, being Walser. And, you know, they're the intrepid people who made a home where no one else could. Why would they not embrace that? Especially when that home is somewhere like this. Sort of not even the ceiling of Europe, more like its roof. And that's Juf. Thanks for watching, and you did ask for this video, so I hope it was worth it. And yeah, if you happen to be in the area, I would say, what on earth is this certified? Do come here. Maybe not at this time of year, because it's so dead. And obviously, yeah, the fact that this is not a major ski resort with, like, you know, piste bashing technology or, you know, snow cannons means that you can't hike in winter either, as this sign says. Any German readers will tell you that this is a sign saying that if you want to walk back to Juppe, which is 40 minutes up that path over there, yeah, there's a big avalanche risk. And it says hike at your own risk. So don't do that if you come here. But I imagine in summer, in warm weather, it would be spectacular up here. And maybe in winter, it would be nice and cozy too. So yeah, come up here, it's nice. It's a bit of a pain to get to. It's quite a long drive, but it's very nice. Very spectacular scenery, and it does feel quite untouched. My eyes are watering because it's so cold. Oh, give myself as a sacrifice. Can you? That's a fucking. What is that?